Hey guys, Stella Chung here, and this is James Duggan, and we got to go to LA this week to preview the Apex Season 3 premiere. So, we got to interview Vince Zampella. What was that?
Continue, Vince Zampella. We got to interview Vince Zampella.
We're trying to have a serious conversation
I know, that's
here,
what we're
and you're
doing.
just ruining it. Okay,
Sorry, I'm just catching a certain. Anyway.
Do you see what I have to deal with?
What did we do?
Yeah, okay. So we got to interview Vince Zampella, CEO of Respawn, and Chad Grenier, I think that's how we say his name. I'm so sorry if we messed up. Who is the designer director. We got to talk to them about past events, direction of the studio, any questions that we had.
Yeah, and for clarity,
general.
this is not about Season 3. We have a lot of content about Season 3, including impressions as well as just gameplay of Crypto, the new map, and the various changes that were added, kind of the hero kit changes. But this specifically is about the direction of the studio, but more specifically as it pertains to Apex Legends. Now I'm going to start us off with the first question, skipping a couple in. Stella, you prepared quite a few questions, and I followed up on one of yours you asked about the Iron Crown event, which, for anybody who lacks context there, was an event that was notoriously poorly monetized. Essentially, there were a number of loot boxes you had to, well, if you wanted to, you would need to purchase that led to exclusive skins, and the only way to get the skin that you wanted was potentially paying through this paywall until you randomly got what you needed. And that never feels good. They did update that, or patch that, and they brought those skins into the shop for $18 a piece, which was very little consolation, especially in the context of that $170 essentially axe, which was the Bloodhound heirloom. So I essentially asked Vince if he was happy with that monetization model that we saw towards the end of the Iron Crown event. And he had this to say: yeah, I think we're experimenting with multiple different ways and pricing structures and models to kind of get content out to our players, and well, things resonated well. The Iron Crown event went really well, except for, minor backlash. And that's not sarcasm, by the way. This is verbatim. It did really well for us, and there was a lot of engagement. Players loved it. So we're going to continue to try to push content out where we can, to be fair about it, but at the same time, we are running a business and we want to make money. So it's always trying to get that balance correct. And this, to be fair, we're definitely leading with the question that I think was this answer was whack, point blank. This answer was totally tone deaf. This answer, the subtext here is we are going to do this again. And in spite of all that Reddit shenanigans and all the kerfuffle with the developer kind of responding to comments on Reddit, it feels as though we didn't learn a lesson and we're okay with what happened.
I mean, I understand where he was going for here, right? I do understand that there's a delicate balance between, yes, this developer company does need to make money off of a free-to-play game, right? Like Fortnite does. They monetize almost all of their skins, which, that's fine, right? But that's the model that they led with. And I think my biggest issue with the Iron Crown, which I actually did a huge video, breaking down every element of it, my biggest concern and complaint about it was that the Legendary Hunt, the very first event they released for players, was really for the community. And it made players feel kind of welcomed and included in this conversation.
Yeah, specifically, they gave away a lot of stuff. There was the triple take skin. That they also introduced the Wraith skin, but that was tied to the Battle Pass for Season 1, but that was still part of that patch. It was something that you could come in and you could play and you can unlock this stuff relatively easily. There wasn't this crazy grind to it, and you were well rewarded. And so that set the bar up here, and then Iron Crown went wah, just kidding. So that might have been based upon some of the sales figures they got back from that initial one, but it seemed like such a crazy leap to go from almost entirely free rewards, and obviously they are a business and they do need to make money, that's obviously super real, to egregiously monetized, timed exclusive, randomized no control initially of what you're getting, and then also that $170 axe for kind of completing all of it and paying your way all the way through. So it was a little bit disappointing to hear this after everything that happened, and I think Vince had a lot of other answers that were really good, specifically the solos one, which was a question you asked.
Yeah, I did ask them, can we expect to see solos come back at any point in time? And Vince actually had a really good answer to this. He said, we're starting things with new modes. I will say you'll see some new stuff tomorrow, which is when we were going to preview the event, which you can kind of figure out. But I think solos need some work for it to be a viable option to stick around long term. I think, as it was a fun distraction. And then Chad actually had something really interesting to say, who's the designer director again. He said, I personally liked solos, but we were looking at the data from the 2-week limited time event. And there were some obvious things we needed to address to keep it around, so we're continuing to try and solve some of these issues in addition to coming up with new modes to introduce to players for a limited time. So I think we're still learning.
You know, this is like 180 degrees in the opposite direction from the Iron Crown answer, which is like they're totally transparent. I think that I agree that solos was a fun distraction, and it was really fun to get into firefights, especially around that like, what was it called? The gladiatorial arena, like the bouncing all over the place.
Oh, Gauntlet.
Gauntlet, right.
Yeah.
So, Gauntlet was a really fun place for solos because it's just absolute mayhem.
Yeah.
And when you down somebody, you don't down them, you just straight up kill them, and that always feels good for players who played something like PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds when you're used to playing pure squads. But I do definitely respect this answer because I do think Apex is a team game first and foremost. All the heroes are clearly balanced around that motif. So in short, I agree with Vince, as well as Chad, that I think solos was fun, but there are obviously some things that need to be addressed, like hero balance, if they were going to move forward with that in a more serious capacity. And ultimately, I think Apex is a team game, and that's the reason why I like it so much. So
yeah, I completely agree. So moving into a weird transition, talking about the balancing and everything, I asked Vince if there were any plans to communicate more with the community, if they were going to open up any more lines of communication, like with weekly streams or Q&As on Reddit, and he said, we are actually looking at doing a stream. I don't know if it's weekly. We have a room that we're setting up. We're just running through testing processes now that we're going to start doing monthly dev streams to kind of get more information out there to players. So I think that's going to be great, especially just having like an open line of communication, because that's so important. And I think it's kind of like how Warframe has like their monthly dev streams where they get to talk about updates, they get to like showcase fan art. I think that's really important to, especially with following this Iron Crown event, having that communication and making players feel heard.
Right, I think historically Respawn is a very well-liked developer, with the exception of that one event, and I think like something like this could kind of help bridge the gap there in terms of what the developers are thinking and what the players are thinking, the developers are thinking. Okay, so moving on, one thing I wanted to discuss and ask about was essentially timed exclusives. If you've played League of Legends, if you played Overwatch, any game as a service with an event, you'll know that there's this kind of like fire lit under your butt to buy a skin before it goes away when it's tied to something like, I don't know, the holidays. And that's always kind of a feel good, feel bad thing because you do feel like, oh, I'm a veteran at this game. I have the 2015 Christmas, Jaina skin or whatever. But it also feels terrible if you miss that kind of stuff because you're taking a break for whatever reason. So essentially I asked, are these timed exclusives ever going to come back, kind of like League of Legends Vault when they open it? And Vince said, there is some limited time stuff that we will eventually probably bring them back. Maybe it'll come back, maybe it won't. Some of the stuff that is popular, we want there to be an exclusivity period so the content feels important, or is important. But then as we get a lot of these new players coming into the game too, we want to see other players playing with the content and say, ooh, maybe I'll be able to get that at some point down the line. So that was the long and the short of it. At the very least, there's going to be a pretty long exclusivity period with stuff like things you unlocked in the Season 1 and 2 Battle Pass. I doubt they'll come back, but maybe like the Wraith Voidwalker skin, for example, might kind of come back in some capacity in the store. So that was good to know. If you missed out on something, you might be able to get it later down the line. All right, so we asked a lot more questions, but I think we probably only have time for one more. So Stella, what's it going to be?
Let's talk about lore. I asked Vince if there are any plans to use the cinematic intros and stuff for events and characters, for all characters, and season updates. And he said eventually they'd like to get to a point where they're doing them for every event and every character, but it'll take a little bit to get there because they're very resource intensive, which I completely understand. So interesting fact, James and I thought that the Wraith animation
Well, you thought. You're the Love Death Robots nerd here. Oh, I spoiled it. All right, continue.
Oh my God, okay. We thought that the Wraith animation looked like an episode of Love, Death, and Robots. Turns out, the group that actually made that animation, that cinematic short, actually worked on an episode of Love, Death, and Robots. So it's super cool that they've been reaching out to different groups, trying to find like different edgy styles that fit the world of Apex, and I think that's super awesome.
And I think they're getting better and better at it. I think this crypto thing really got my interest, kind of peaked in the character's lore, and this is kind of following that Overwatch motif of, hey, we're gonna tell some lore in the game with voice lines and environmental cues, but we're gonna do a lot of lore outside the game for those of you that care about it, instead of trying to like cram it in there where it doesn't belong in terms of multiplayer, so yeah.
Well, if you guys want to see us break down more of the lore, or if you guys want to follow updates on Apex, keep it here at IGN, and we'll see you in the next video.